Hi everyone, it's Sonia here. I wanted to give you another update on what looks like is going to be a huge catastrophe that's looming on the horizon here in Quebec. I'm talking about our healthcare system, which is really just right on the edge of the precipice right now. Before I start, I just want to say thanks for liking the video and thanks for your support on Patreon. That helps keep my channel going. And also please check out the link below for the purifier pouch from Just Gone Systems, which releases a little bit of CO2 gas in the air that removes viruses, bacteria, fungus, and mold. This thing will seriously deodorize any room or your car. And actually, there's a lot more to it than that. So for more info, please check out the link below. And if you order through the link, you get 15% off and no shipping and handling for a 3-pack of pouches. The date is coming up, October 15th. Any workers in the healthcare sector, public or private, are going to be put on unpaid leave. The starting point was 30,000 unvaccinated healthcare workers in the public sector and 20,000 in the private. Now, in that time since this was announced and decreed, a lot of those people have gone out and gotten vaccinated. I know a few who did it. They didn't want to. They were very angry. They felt quite violated, but they did do it because they don't want to lose their jobs. And actually, it's gone all the way down to about 17,000 workers left who haven't gotten their shot, which is actually still a lot of people, and that's only in the public sector. This was in Journal de Montréal opinion piece warning Monsieur Dubé, our health minister, there is an iceberg in front of us. I mean, really, Christian Dubé refuses to budge at all, refuses to accommodate. He's promising us that they're somehow going to save the healthcare sector. There will not be a disruption in services. He's just going to reorganize things, and he's got this whole big plan. Well, Christian Dubé and François Legault have a plan which involves luring back retired nurses by offering them a $15,000 bonus and also encouraging part-time employees to go full-time. Plus, they got a few other things up their sleeves. But it's looking like this might be not as good a plan as they would like us to think. All those healthcare workers will be forced on unpaid leave. That includes 7,000 people who work directly with the public and about another 10,000 who do other things like kitchen staff and secretaries. So he's anticipating a service breakdown. The minister doesn't like that expression. He talks about reorganization. So as I was saying, his plan is to lure back nurses. Here's the problem. He has a plan to lure back nurses, but he seems to have no plan whatsoever to attract orderlies and other workers, even though it sounds like, wow, look, it's only 7,000 now. Well, first of all, there's already a shortage of 4,300 nurses. Add to that another 7,000 workers who are going to be on unpaid leave. These are people who work directly with the patients. That might seem like a small percentage, but the thing is, it's not distributed evenly. It's not like each place is going to lose 4 or 5 people. There are some places where 100% of the staff is vaccinated. Nobody's going to go on leave. There's other places where there's a few. And then there are other places where a lot of staff in a particular area are going to end up getting the boot. Okay, this is a public retirement home. Just to give you an example, public retirement home, Centre Frédéric Georges Herriot, who is expecting to lose 46 workers. And as they explained in here, they're describing how some of the wings of their establishment, like the Third North and the First and the Second West, you see, they're saying they're going to lose 20% of their préposés. Those are the PABs, the orderlies. In these wings, that's 1 in 5 orderlies disappeared, and 40% of the auxiliary nurses and 30% of the orderlies, I keep forgetting the English word for it, sorry, on this particular wing. So you see, it's like actually quite big gaps in what they need to be serving the residents, and that's in a public home. But meanwhile, on the private side, they're also going to have some very serious problems. Our government keeps talking about how they got so many people to come in and get their shots, and there's only 7,000 left. And they have some plans for what they're going to do to palliate that, I'll tell you. But they haven't mentioned the private residences, and actually they have a really big problem too. 20% of the workers in the private retirement homes are still missing their 2 doses. So they're facing losing 20% of their staff, and they're talking about closing the entire residence because they have no choice. So they discussed a little bit here about here. They said it makes no sense. I mean, to get rid of everybody, you know, when you have shortages already. So they are either going to shut down, or several establishments have told the Journal they're considering challenging the government to be able to continue to provide adequate service. Some of them are saying, if I have no choice, I will call on unvaccinated workers. Basically, some of them are considering that if they have no choice, they're going to have to just defy this order to ban their unvaccinated workers. They have a lot of people living in these places, paying money for their rent and for the services. And if they lose 20% of their staff and they can't provide those services, they would have to close down, which would mean all these old people would pretty much be displaced. Where are they going to go? To the public homes, the CHSLD? They don't have the space for them. Where are they going to put them? In the hospital? It's not really doable. So they're saying their options would be, this is what I guess the government's proposing: decrease the frequency of baths, less regular change of incontinence briefs, serve reheated meals rather than fresh meals, reduce housekeeping and laundry, and recreational staff assigned to elder care. So I don't think that they consider that that's an acceptable plan, and I don't think that they think that closing down is acceptable either. So it looks like they might end up just defying the order, because it doesn't seem like not defying it is an option. Now, here's another thing. Why we're facing an iceberg. This is something particular that I want you to know about. As it says here, pressure increases on pediatric emergencies. Now, for some reason, the children's hospitals are really flooded. They're having like almost twice the amount of normal volume of patients coming in at the children's and at Saint-Justine, and they're saying that kids are coming in with other kinds of infections. It's not COVID. It's not that the kids are flooding in with COVID, but they're having especially a lot of RSV, and it's particularly severe. And that's in addition to things like, you know, kids just having accidents, breaking bones, getting pneumonia, or whatever else kids get. There's so much traffic at the children's hospitals, and not just these big ones in Montreal, but also outside. There is a really severe staffing shortage, and it's starting to have some very serious consequences, such as this situation, which was reported on TVA Nouvelle. The hospitals are overflowing. A catastrophe was barely avoided. So this woman brought her 2 children to the hospital in where she lives, which I don't remember what it was, but it wasn't the big hospitals in Montreal. It was just outside. So she brought her 2 kids in because they had fevers. And what happened was that pediatric emergency department was so understaffed. They put IVs in the kids' arms and then kind of left them unattended for several hours. And what happened was the little one here, you see her baby, the IV like blew out the vein in the hand, and all that liquid went into the hand and blocked off all the circulation. The hand swelled up to 5 times the normal size, and it was turning black. They noticed it. They took the IV out. They were freaked out completely, of course. And they went to Montreal to go to Saint-Justine. And they said they had to wait a really, really, really long time for triage. Now, I'm not going to replay the whole video now and listen to it again, but I think she said it was like 8 hours that they waited at that hospital. And all that happened in this entire time was they kept testing the kids for COVID. They tested them 3 times. It wasn't COVID. And finally, like, they didn't get the service they needed at Saint Justin, so they went to the children's. When they got there, the kids were tested for RSV. It turned out they both had RSV. So the family went through this nightmare with one of the kids almost ending up needing an amputation of their hand because of lack of staff. Saint Justin is packed. They say that there is somebody at the outside of the hospital that when you come in, it's like a pre-triage where they decide whether you can even come in. And a lot of people bringing kids with fevers, and they're like, just go home, your kid's fine. They're not testing them for anything. They're not assessing them. It's just like, okay, it's not an emergency, just go home. But the thing is, there's nowhere else for these people to go. They can't access the clinic. Maybe they don't have a family doctor. So they're getting turned away at the door. Now, if you make it in the door, then you have to wait hours just to get triaged. And then you're going to wait to see the doctor. And this, we're talking little kids who are really sick. So this is a horrible situation. And at a time like this, where emergencies are not able to deal with the volume, they're closing their emergency departments for part of the day. They're closing other departments in the hospital. At a time like this, now they think it's okay to lose some staff. So you're going to go put something like 30,000 healthcare workers on leave at a time like this. If it was me making that decision, I would think I'm going to get completely destroyed for doing this. I will be personally responsible for thousands of people not getting care and possibly dying. And I will never get away with this. But somehow Legault and Dubé, they feel okay about it. Like, they think it's a good idea and they're going to get away with it. I don't really understand how. They have this power that they've seized now that they're ruling by decree, and they've decided to completely reorganize our health system. I mean, they're not the first ones to think of that. Other people have tried to do healthcare system reforms here in Quebec. Apparently, it happens every 5 years, but this is the most radical one that's ever happened. But for some reason, it starts with firing a bunch of unvaccinated nurses. Not totally unvaccinated, just unvaccinated for COVID, for some reason. And then they want to, like I said, they're going to try to lure back retired nurses and try to lure back nurses from agencies or from private. And they're going to try to get people who are working part-time to go to full-time. And they're going to give bonuses also to the nurses that are working full-time. But this only applies to nurses, respiratory therapists, and 2 others that are on that echelon. It doesn't apply to other people who work in the hospital, and not even to orderlies. So how's that working out? Well, actually, so far, not that good. As you see here, it says timid start for the return of 4,300 nurses. Yeah, that's only the nurses they were missing in the first place. Never mind the ones they're going to fire now. To date, 31 people have agreed to return, and 63 are in reflection. 31 people. Somewhere else they mentioned in another area, there were like 12 people who said that they might come back. Yeah, in other regions, enthusiasm is more modest, so even less enthusiastic than that. In Outaouais, Bas-Saint-Laurent. Anyway, it's not off to a roaring start. And also, they reported here, wage premiums attract few nurses to the Quebec City region. Even though they're promising them all this money, so far, it doesn't seem like people are flocking to it. I mean, I know that the ones that are already working full-time are really happy they're going to get extra money. But as far as bringing in people who weren't already in there, it's not so far seeming to be extremely successful. In Quebec City, establishment managers must recruit 1,327 Category 1 workers. Okay, few recruits. Since September 23rd, health workers have even raised their hands. 4 people were recruited at CHU Quebec University Laval. 12 nurses accepted full-time positions at IUCPQ. I mean, the numbers are really, really small. They also came up with the bright idea of getting ambulance workers to replace other missing healthcare workers. So I guess if the ambulance workers are just kind of hanging around outside the emergency, waiting for an ambulance call, they might as well go in and act as nurses or orderlies for a little while. but could they actually work in retirement homes? So they would just sort of park their ambulance outside and then go in and do a shift as an orderly. And then what happens when somebody calls the ambulance? You know, I'm not an expert, but I don't think this is going to work. So here's one more thing I wanted to show you. I showed you this before, that the emergencies are very, very full in Montreal. And whenever you see Christian Dubé talking about who's going to the hospital and the emergencies, he always mentions it's the unvaccinated people who are going to the hospital. And he forgets to mention that that would be for COVID, not for everything in general. As you see, these are very high, but if you look at the statistics here of what's actually going on in the hospitals, and they say, you know, they had 20 COVID intakes for one day and maybe 20 that went out. But you look at any individual hospital and they might have had one person or maybe two or maybe zero, but it's clear that there's not a lot of COVID patients flooding any one of these hospitals. So while he's encouraging people to get vaccinated to stay out of the hospital, he should mention that getting vaccinated for COVID only keeps you out of the hospital for COVID. It doesn't mean that if everyone in Quebec gets vaccinated, it's going to solve this problem, because people are coming in for other reasons and the hospitals are understaffed, and that's a very serious problem. And if we lose more staff, it's going to be even more dangerous. Now, surprisingly, in spite of all this, Legault dominates, and not nearly, means he dominates and not just barely. Legault is still very popular in the pre-election polls. Surprisingly, most people still say that they would vote for him. It's like the man can do no wrong. He's very popular in spite of all this. But apparently, it's like he has a base of supporters, which it's mostly people outside of Montreal, but it's a lot of people. And I don't know, somehow they're really happy with how he's been running everything around here. Managing the pandemic, 79%, economy, 76%, public finances, health, 59%, education, 59%, environment, 58%. Now, I'm wondering, when is the tipping point going to happen for these people, when they're going to realize that they're making bad decisions? Now, it is possible, I guess, that some miracle will happen, like everything will work out great. But, you know, if it doesn't, well, there's a big catastrophe up ahead, like someone said, potentially an iceberg. Where's going to be the tipping point for the people who have this sort of cultish adoration for François Legault to realize that actually we have a bit of a problem? And I'm thinking, you know, when it comes to healthcare, if it gets any worse, then anyone who has to deal with the healthcare system and experiences personally how bad it is, or if someone that they know, that they care about, tries to get help and has to deal with that horrible situation, they're going to see firsthand like how he is ruining our healthcare system, and this is going to go down. And I don't know, maybe the other people who are contenders should just campaign harder so we get these guys out. I really can't understand how they can rule by decree for a year and a half, declare himself emperor. Every single thing he does now, it's by decree. I think he should leave before we have a real big disaster on our hands. Everything that goes right, he takes credit for it. Anything that goes wrong, it's not his fault, you know. Anyhow, I wanted to give you an update on that. And yeah, the date of the 15th is coming up very soon. And so then we're going to see, I think we're going to see pretty quickly what kind of effect this is going to have on the healthcare system. So that's it. Thanks for joining me. Thanks again for your support on Patreon. Thank you for checking out the link for the pouches. And thanks for listening to me, and I'll see you next time.